Hello? Hello? Hello. Hi, everybody. Yo, how's it going? I'm TJ DeVries, as Prime introduced me. It's really nice to meet all of you. We're going to do a little talk here about Lua and NeoVim, why we chose Lua, why NeoVim's working with Lua, and we're just going to try and go through that today. So here's basically the deal about what we're going to try and do today. We're going to try and give you enough information about Lua to basically make an informed decision, make an informed guess about, hey, why did Lua make this choice? And you may not agree with everyone, but hopefully, given this understanding, you'll be able to make the right choices when you're using Lua and work through that well. And hopefully, my goal is after you understand that, you'll hopefully agree with me and the other people at NeoVim that Lua is a great choice for making and scripting NeoVim. So this talk is not about basically like some way to do step-by-step syntax writing for Lua or like exactly what you need to do to write a plugin, things like that. It's going to be much more focused on the general principles, although there will be some Lua code that we show along the way. If you're interested in those kinds of things, if you want to be able to do like, how do I do a Lua plugin? How do I learn more about Lua? These are some great resources that you can use to figure that out. Okay, so a little background. I think one of the powerful things about Lua is that it is powerful and simple. And you can trace its root back. It's a very interesting story if you guys have time to read. We don't have time to go through all of it today. But really, it's quite interesting. Going back to 1993 was when Lua 1.0 was released. It was created in Brazil, and it's in quite common use for a lot of scripting or games or embedding, those kinds of things today. If you're looking for the awesome presentation tool I'm using, it's Look At Me. I can talk about that in the questions afterwards. So I think Lua's main focus, its main sort of guiding principle is really the idea of mechanisms instead of policies. And I think this goes so great with the idea that NeoVim has of strong defaults and extensibility, choose to. You can go ahead and ask Bjorn about that. I think he came up with that as far as I know, and I love it. I'm going to be stealing that from now on. So what do I mean mechanisms instead of policies? The idea is basically that Lua provides you, the developer, with many, they like to call them meta mechanisms to implement features. This means that Lua doesn't ship with every feature built into the language sort of by default or with special keywords. And as a really strong example of this is the idea of tables in Lua. They're just associative arrays, if that means something different for you. And tables can really be used to build all sorts of different kinds of things. Modules, prototype-based objects, class-based objects. The list keeps on going on. It keeps on going on and on, right? So I think that's very powerful. It's very powerful that it includes just one sort of mechanism to implement all these features. I love Python. This is not a dig on Python. This is just a different goal that Lua has versus Python. In Python, they have special keywords for each of its policies, right? Python has a special keyword for class. Now, it is true that you can do things with meta classes, etc. We could talk about that at a different time. We could talk about it at a different time. We don't have time today, right? But the idea is, for Python, when you want to make a class, you use the special class keyword. In Lua, what they do is they provide a mechanism, which is via set meta table, and that's just a function built into the language. So there's no new syntax you have to learn, no new keywords, no extra parsing or no difficulties like that. You're able to just apply that set meta table to an object or to a table and then get sort of this idea of object-oriented programming, even in Lua. This is a somewhat simple example of how you could have a vector object and you could add them together. You could imagine extending this to provide other sort of arithmetic operations on vectors. And I think you can see the influence of this model on Lua's larger and overall goals, which are simplicity, small size, portability, embeddability, and particularly for LuaJIT, speed, right? We'll go through each of these and sort of explain how they work. So simplicity, right? I think, as we've mentioned before, Lua's idea is that they're going to provide mechanisms that can address several different needs. So this precludes adding all of these additional policies all the time or language-specific constructs, right? And a result that's very cool is the Lua reference manual is only about 100 pages, and that it covers not only the entire language and the standard libraries, but also the C API and how to embed it, right? So I think that's sort of really powerful, which is great for people who want to start writing plugins in Lua because it allows you to get started on the language quickly, right? If you want to change something about your editor, you just want to change it. You don't want to start doing things like, oh, I need to spend a week learning what monads are. Nothing wrong with languages where monads is a popular feature or term. I'm just saying that might be difficult, right? Okay. The next one is that it is small size. So this is great. The binary size for Lua is about 200 kilobytes, which is cool because it allows things like NeoVim to be able to ship it with effectively almost no bloat, which is awesome. There's almost no change in the size of NeoVim when we're shipping this, this binary. So that's very effective if you want to embed it inside of your thing. And the sort of result of this, of course, is that, yes, the standard library is smaller for Lua than for other languages. This is especially true given the next idea, which is portability, right? So Lua is implemented in ISO-C, which basically gives it the ability to be run anywhere that you can have an ISO-C compiler, which is more or less everywhere. So you can run Lua inside of OS kernels, on mainstream systems, mainframes, even bare metal. So it's very awesome that Lua is able to be used in this wide variety of experiences. And so when you couple small plus portable, it pretty much just leaves you in a situation where it's like, well, good luck writing a date time library in ISO-C. That sort of stuff is not going to work very well. And so generally those sort of things are left to extensions or other libraries that you might include in your overall, Lua distribution or application. And one of the other goals is embeddability. So what's something very interesting about Lua is it sort of has this dual-sided embeddability. The first side is that it's embeddable as an extension language, and the other is that it is itself an extensible language. What do I mean? An extension language means that you could basically implement some features in Lua, right? And then you can control them from the host. For NeoVim, this is pretty cool. There's some very exciting things like this is VimScript here. You can basically declare a variable in VimScript and assign it to a function reference effectively. And you can use that function reference inside of VimScript, right? So that's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting that you're able to do something like map over this and use Lua inside of it. So Lua can be used to extend those things very well. But not only that, Lua is also itself an extensible language. So you can reuse foreign languages within Lua. Generally, this is done for using the C API, things like that. So it's very cool because you can do something like in NeoVim, we have vim.fn. And I think it's actually available in Vim now as well on later versions of Vim that are compiled with plus Lua. This allows you to do something like vim.fn and then call any VimScript function that's available to you, which is great, right? So if you want to try and call something like vim.fn.fnamemodify, right, a common function that you might do, and you might be familiar with the syntax and what each of the colon modifiers are, boom, you can just call that from Lua, right? So one of the key ideas here that you'll notice throughout Lua is that mechanisms exposed as functions are naturally mapped to the API, particularly the C API. Okay, and that allows it to be embedded so much more easily. Cool. One other mention, this is just it's not the world's best example. It doesn't really matter. It's just an example of sort of raw speed that I've seen around. When I execute this function in my Vim or NeoVim, it takes about 5.5 seconds, right, to complete this. But in LuaJIT, which is the default Lua that we'd ship within NeoVim, it takes about 3 milliseconds. You can test it out for yourselves if you want. You can run that. Again, these kinds of things. It's I think it's pretty cool. And there's a very different speed, particularly when you're trying to do some string processing, numerics, these kinds of things. So it's quite exciting to be able to do. So you're like, okay, yep, all right, I see those goals. I see that those things exist, right? How do they accomplish that, right? How do they accomplish that? They accomplish it through several steps. The first one is that they have a very simple type system. There's only 8 types, and there's nothing else that exists. Now, of course, you can sort of make ideas about types building on top of these, but these are the 8 types of Lua. There's nil, there's Boolean, so just true, false, numbers, strings. User data are basically C sort of structs or other ideas that might exist. And then we have tables, functions, and threads. And I think these are sort of the main idea about what Lua is built on. I do see some people mentioning Vim 9 in the chat. It's true that Vim 9 is a lot faster than VimScript, but we can talk about that maybe more at the end if people are interested. So once again, we'll come back to this idea of mechanisms instead of policies, right? Lua has replaced many different features, right, with a few simple mechanisms, as we've discussed before. And I think I love their idea of economical in concepts, as in what Lua is trying to do is make very simple and powerful concepts and use them freely. And so it's very interesting. Whenever you want to store data or use data, you can use tables. That's the only way to do it in Lua. Whenever you want to abstract some idea, you use functions. And whenever you want to control program flow, you can use coroutines. So let's talk about each of those ideas. Tables are the only way to store data. And what's interesting in Lua is tables can store any value into a key or value, right? This is sort of idea of you could put functions into the keys of the table. You can put other tables as the keys. Any of those things, you can do that. They can be used for many low-level constructs, you know, just the more simple data structures that we're pretty much all familiar with, I think, of maps, arrays, sets, and records. All of those are available to you to be built on almost directly on tables. And what's very interesting is because tables are used for all things, Lua can focus very tightly on implementing this quickly or implementing tables as things that are very quick and lightweight. And all of these basically get the benefits from that, right? And so one note for sort of newcomers into Lua that I'll just point out here is arrays have no special status in Lua. They're just tables with numbers. And I think also one cool thing is that then they reuse the same mechanism to implement higher level constructs like modules, objects, and environments. We did a small example of how you could sort of do object-oriented style programming with Lua, right? And we'll actually do another one here. So there's some syntactic sugar on top of Lua that, for those of you who might be new, might be surprised when you see it happen. But it's quite simple, and the other main benefit is that it's fast and allows for very simple mapping to the C API. Effectively, a lot of it just revolves around this colon, which basically transforms this function definition to being a table, its key, and a variable named self. Self is not a special word or anything like that. It's just the default variable name for this kind of thing. And then you can see as you go down, when we do something like a:\deposit, what that really is saying to Lua is the table A with a reference to deposit, passing in A as the first variable. Okay, so this makes it actually quite easy to write sort of object-oriented style programming in Lua. The next major type is functions. So in Lua, functions are first class, anonymous, and they have lexical scoping. So what does that mean? First class just means, hey, you can store it as a variable. It can be returned from functions. You can pass functions into functions. Functions can return functions on top of functions. It's just functions all the way down, right? And so I think that's really powerful because it allows you to reuse functions in many different ways. They are anonymous. So really, when you write something in Lua like function add, what you're really doing is you're declaring a variable and assigning it equal to a first class function value. And then the last part is that they have lexical scoping, which pretty much just means, hey, it's a little bit more complicated in Lua. The word that you'll be looking for is up values if you're more interested in this topic, but it is possible to reference variables basically one scope up from where you are and bind them to the function that you're in. This is often very powerful in like event-driven games or things like that you might be doing with Lua. And what's cool is this basically gets sort of reused in all the different ways that you interact with Lua. So when you make a module, you might keep some functions hidden, but they're only available, I would say, lexically, right, to those functions. So if you're more interested in that, I'd recommend reading about up values. Another example, sort of a mechanism over policy, is that in many languages, right, they sort of introduce this special kind of try catch or try except or these kinds of words, but Lua doesn't have this policy. I think the primary reason for this is it makes it very difficult to map to the Lua C API, right? It's very, very hard to sort of generate and write this thing in the C API for Lua. So instead, Lua implements, just reuses its function mechanism, right? And it introduces a new function called pcall. Pcall is a higher order function. It just accepts functions and arguments as its arguments, and it calls them. If they succeed, then it'll return true, and if not, they'll return false. There are a few other error handling sort of mechanisms, including xpcall, as Prime knows, but this is the primary one that I think a lot of people would use. And what's very nice is that in C, this is quite easy to use. Let me go one size out here so we don't wrap on this slide. Lua has basically a stacked-based API for C, and you can actually see this code is effectively the same. We're getting a global Vim. We're going to get the field, update package path from it, and then we pcall on the last thing that we have on the stack. And if it fails, then we're going to error out. It's very, very simple to map both to the C and to the Lua side, which is quite very, very nice. And it allows much easier embedding as well. The last sort of Lua fundamental type is a thread. And threads are just basically instances of coroutines in Lua. And once again, instead of implementing new syntax or new special keywords, Lua ships with a coroutine library, and you just interact with coroutines using the coroutine library. And coroutines are asymmetric, which, like I mentioned here, is basically just allowing that you can do suspend and resume execution. And there's quite a bit of stuff online about this that you could read if you're more interested in how to use coroutines. A quick example, just to give people a general idea of how it could work, you could imagine like in a game, you might have 3 different characters and they're all represented by coroutines. You're sort of trying to like run them, and they're each going to advance 1 frame at a time. You could do that via coroutines. This is just sort of a simple, not exactly great. I wouldn't send this in production or anything like that, but it's just sort of to give you the general idea of how you might be able to use coroutines in Lua. Oh, shoot. I didn't want to slow this up. Show the slide. No, I'm just kidding. So trade-offs of Lua. This is basically everyone's most hated feature about Lua. Yes, it's one indexed. Yes, I know. Yes, that's sort of maybe a downside for some people. But for me, honestly, as soon as I start writing it, as soon as I start working with it, I almost never have to deal with it as a problem, and it's a pretty simple fix once I do. But I just figured I would bring it up and clear the air in case some people wanted to see it, right? Yes, let the table flipping begin. So here's some other trade-offs for Lua versus other languages. I think, it does have, because like it does not allow itself to grow more complex in its syntax, generally, it doesn't have things like operators like plus equals, which maybe you're familiar with in other languages. And I think the main reason why it doesn't have some of these operators is very hard to map this back to the Lua C API. However, in some ways, this can be a benefit for NeoVim because we, people want to configure their editor, not learn a language. And so if the language is simple to learn and simple to do simple things, then that's actually a benefit for NeoVim shipping Lua. In terms of another trade-off, I think Lua itself does not ship with this sort of vast library of non-portable expansions, doesn't really ship sort of batteries included in some ways. But I think with NeoVim, we can sort of combat this by including a standard library of functions for Lua, both interacting with NeoVim and just for sort of general purpose ideas about how to do things in Lua. Another pro is that the host, which in this case would be NeoVim, can sandbox the Lua execution. It's able to stop it or control the functions included or some of these other things if desired, or if desired to prevent for some of these. And I think obviously, I think it's easier, at least for me. I don't know about other people, but it's a lot easier to write Lua than it is for C, at least in my experience, right? And so it's, it's garbage collector. It has strings that are a little bit easier to work with, those kinds of things. And I think like a strong example of this is including sort of the built-in LSP in the latest NeoVim. I think it's quite cool that that's basically all built in Lua, and it's quite great. So sort of in summary, it's a widely used language. It's fast, it's safe. External libraries exist. If you wanted to do something with crazy fast JSON, or you wanted to do something with TCP servers or whatever, you could actually install those libraries and use them. And also Lua is, I think, probably it is quite useful outside of NeoVim. And so I think sort of in conclusion, basically the goals of Lua are the reason that NeoVim chose it, right? I hope you can see via its simplicity, its small size, its portability, its embeddability, and speed. I think it's quite great choice for NeoVim to include and to use. And I've been having a lot of fun hacking on it and working on it. So that's pretty much my presentation. I'll take some answers or questions from the chat, and here's some links about me if you're interested. Does anyone in the chat have any questions? Oh, I think I have quite a bit of a delay, don't we? Do Vim users really care about what embedded scripting language is used by plugin authors? Isn't it more efficient? Oh, two questions there. Okay, so the first one, do users care? I don't think that they really care generally, but I do think they might care if they experience 100x speed up, for example, or they're able to do things that weren't possible to do before. I also think Vim plugin authors might prefer which language they're writing in. I much prefer writing Lua, and I've been having a great time writing lots of Lua plugins, which we can talk about at some other time if you guys want. Follow me on Twitch. You know how it is. So then also someone asked, isn't it more inefficient to store all arrays as associative arrays? Actually, Lua uses a lot of little tricks to make that not really be the case, and it has a lot of cool examples of how it does that. I don't think we really have time to do that. What do I think about Lua transpilers like Moonscript or Teal? They seem quite interesting, and there's also Fennel and some other ones that people are using. I think it's cool. I think it's cool that you can compile down to Lua, and so you could write some other higher level language if you're interested in doing that and still execute the Lua afterwards. I'm quite interested in Teal in particular, but I haven't done very much with it. Talk about Vim 9. Sure, Vim 9, they are going to make a new scripting language for Vim 9. It's sort of like an extension of VimScript. It has some very cool features like types, and it'll compile down to bytecode. It's significantly faster than regular Vim script, so I think there's lots of benefits for Vim 9. I have started working on a project that compiles Vim 9 code into LuaJIT just to see if we could make the Vim 9 code run faster in LuaJIT than in Vim 9. So we'll have to see for sort of like normative plugin experiences if there's anything there. You can check that out at on my GitHub. It's just Vim9JIT. You can probably search it. It's probably the first thing. What were other options you considered instead of Lua? I'm not actually sure what other options were considered. I don't actually know 100%, Mario. So you'd have to ask maybe Bjorn in the chat. The Prime asks, why are you so good looking? I don't know what to say except thank you. Have you had any performance issues with Lua during NVim development? No, exactly the opposite, Locus. I think there's a lot of crazy, like Lua is just crazy fast at a lot of things. I've been writing a sort of fuzzy finder in Lua, and I'm able to live grep over NeoVim source code almost instantly. We can just like take a look at this. So this is, actually that's not the one I want to do. Let's do this. So we can just start typing like function, and we've just live grepped over the entire NeoVim code base using function. All of the text and string gets processed by Lua. So I find it very, very fast. I find it very, very fast. I think so. Ion, you asked about how did I make the slides. It's Doc Savage, look at me. I really liked it. It's actually just a markdown file, and it'll be available on my GitHub pages. If Lua didn't exist, what language would NeoVim have used? I don't know. It's a very tough question. Will NeoVim support VimL? Yes, it does, and it still does. Vim9 versus Lua. I sort of already talked about that a little bit, but I prefer Lua, and it's nice that we didn't have to write the language. How does Lua affect the user? Tatenda, I think probably the main thing would be some plugins might be faster. It's not clear if Vim9 will be faster than LuaJIT or not. And so there's lots of things like that. 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck. I think probably I would have to go one horse-sized duck just because 100 would be very difficult. I've always thought one seems much more likely to win, but I don't know. It seems tough. It seems tough. Will your slides be available? Yes, they'll be available at my GitHub. I can link them. GitHub, TJ DeVries, config manager. They'll be in. Actually, they're already up. I can link them to you. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. This is Lua Design Principles. You can find them here. It's just a markdown file. Wish this talk was an hour longer. Stop by my stream. Does Lua support functional programming? Yes, there's a very popular library called Lua Fun, and it's all about functional programming in Lua, and it's really great. Could you summarize very briefly why the NeoVim offers felt it's necessary to split from VimL and add Lua support? We did not split from VimL in NeoVim. I think it's kind of maybe misconception. There are features that we haven't implemented yet from Vim that are in VimScript, but they are on our like to-do list generally. It is unclear if we'll do them because someone has to do the patches and do other things like that. But we are not like antagonistic to VimL, I don't think. And over time, I'd like for them to be, you can write the same VimL in both places. That's actually why I'm working on my Vim9JIT project, but we'll see if that ever happens. Let's see. Vim plugin also wants to probably work with both Vim and NeoVim. Why would they use Lua? Well, Vim does have plus Lua, so they could compile with plus Lua if they wanted to. And there are works, especially from Prabir, I don't know if he's in the chat right now, to try and make the two sides more compatible with each other. So if they want to make them compatible with both and written in Lua, I do think it's possible to do. But also, you know, some people just want to support Vim and some people just want to support NeoVim, and I think that's okay as well. People talking about Fennel. Why did you choose Lua 5.1, not newer versions? We chose Lua 5.1 primarily because of LuaJIT. Lua doesn't actually follow a Semver strategy, so 5.1 to 5.2 is not really like a Semver style minor version bump. It is in some ways sort of a complete new example. Can you please add more examples of Lua into the NeoVim docs? That's a great idea, yes. Oh, Prabir, hey, you just linked it. Awesome. Yes, we are working to make it easier to write Lua in both places, though. Any plans to add a security model that allows controlling what a plugin can do on your system? That's a great question, David. I don't know 100% if there's anything. Does Lua have a line debugger, and is it accessible in NeoVim? It does have a debug.debug, but it's not exactly a line debugger. There is some work with NVim DApp to be able to do it. Oh, I should probably go back to my presentation, huh? We'll go down to the bottom so you guys can see my links for longer. Nice. What annoys you about Lua in the context of NVim? What would you like to see change? There's some things like adding auto commands and key maps that feel a little bit difficult right now, but we're working on integrating those more tightly with NeoVim, I would say. How do you make your plugins backwards compatible with regular Vim? I don't, because I use a lot of Vim.api functions that are only available in NeoVim. And so they would not be compatible whether I was writing them in VimScript or in Lua. But some people, you can do it if you don't use any specific functions for either one, or you try and help them out. Let's see. Can we go 100% Lua for configuring NVim, like AwesomeWM? I actually use AwesomeWM. And yes, if you wanted to, all you'd have to do right now, we are in the process of adding init.lua, but you can basically just Lua file your init.lua, and then after that, you can start doing it. We are adding improvements, though, to make it Lua feel more like first-class support, just like Vim is. Okay. There are ideas about adding WASM, but I'll let other people handle talking about that in the future. How did you end up getting involved as a core NeoVim developer? I submitted my first PR 6 years ago. Justin helped me out. He's in the chat. We added a status line update. It had like 100 comments. It was my first PR ever for open source, and I loved it so much that I just kept on working with NeoVim and trying to help out and being around, and then eventually they wanted some help with a few other things, so I worked on it. Sebastian asks, how would one decide whether to use Lua, VimScript, or C for new NeoVim features? So, for example, we used Lua to make the NVim LSP client, which I'll talk about tomorrow, because it needed to be performance sensitive, but it would have been very, 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 very difficult to implement in C. So I think, if it has a lot of business logic, if it has sort of a lot of these different kinds of ideas, Lua seems like a better choice. You'll be able to get it done a lot faster. And we could always move performance critical sections of that back into C and call it from Lua, which is really great. I think for NeoVim, probably many new features will be implemented in just Lua or C. Can you have a read-only buffer displayed above the main buffer? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Wow, Prabir, you have Vim running WASM stuff? Oh, am I getting kicked off?
Things are he's fairly adept. He's waving.
Am I getting kicked off?
He is waving,
Brian?
so he might be ready to go.
Oh, he can't hear me. That's okay. Can you go from Lua to Vim 9? I'm working on it, Prime. I'm working on it. I'm working on compiling it. Okay, I think I'm leaving. Okay, if you want to chat more with me, hang out on Twitter, hang out on Twitch, hang out whatever, follow me, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys later.